This garden was built to glorify God. I'm Eileen Summerville, and this is my garden, High Meadow. The reason it's called High Meadow is because I had a tree man here cutting down a tree, and he ruined my grass down below, and they threw out some seed in the middle of the winter, and in the spring it was this high, and I kept cutting it and it kept getting this high, and I was walking through it one day and I said, that's the name of this place, is High Meadow. It's not there anymore because I fixed it, but I liked the name. I was trying to figure out a name for the garden. Oh, my earliest recollection is as a child putting seeds in the ground, trying to get them to grow. I don't know that they ever grew. I just loved digging in the dirt, But I didn't really erupt or come above ground as a gardener until age 40. I took a trip for my 40th birthday. My parents were born in Ireland, so this is in my genes, and I didn't know it. I wasn't aware of it. I was always outside piddling around, but I wasn't aware of the extent that it ran through my blood, And so I took a trip to see my family in Ireland and England and Wales and Scotland. And when I was in England, all my family are gardeners. I'm the youngest of 10, and they all had beautiful gardens, but it never dawned on me that I could do that too, And so I went on a trip to England, and first person was to see my Uncle Mick. He was a musician. He lived in Brighton, in the south of England, outside of London, and he was a very tall man. He was about 6'3" or so. And so he had this beautiful garden. It was small compared to this place. But every day he would go to the back door, and he had these old gardening shoes. He would slip them on. He would go outside. He would fold his hands like this. He would look up at the sky, and he'd say, it's a grand day for gardening. And I would think, oh my God, what's he talking about? I can't even see the sun, Every day he did the same thing. And then he would turn around to his wife, and he'd say, Lily, if you need me today, I'll be in the East Garden. And the next day he would do the same thing. He'd say, Lily, if you need me today, I'll be in the West Garden. And I'm standing there at the door thinking, you could see the whole garden from one place. I'm thinking, what's he talking about? Next day, I'll be in the South Garden. And he had a little hen house, and he had a little, what he called a summer house, which was made of glass. And they had 2 cots in it and a table for tea in the afternoon. And the glass was to keep them warm in the cold of England, right? And so I just watched what he did. He went out and potted around, and he would talk to the plants and stuff. And I didn't really think anything of it. It was natural, So I went to Ireland to figure out who I was, because I always felt very odd in how I think in such a creative manner. But when I was with my family there, I was normal. This was all normal to me. So that was the beginning, and it was sort of like this volcano erupted, and I came home and I sat my daughters down at the dining room table, and I said, girls, we no longer have a yard, we have a garden. And they're looking at each other thinking, uh-oh, something's gonna happen here. And I said, and we no longer work in the yard, we go play in the garden. And every month, we're gonna have a playmate of the month who's gonna help mother in the garden. And they're going, oh no. And I say, well, okay, now who wants to be the first playmate of the month? And my oldest daughter, Pat, she hated the garden. She hated coming out and pulling the weeds and everything. This was in Atlanta, in Dunwoody. And I've built 4 gardens so far, but that was that one. And she would just complain the whole time. She ended up being a landscape architect. She designs parks for Fairfax County, Virginia. And she loves plants in the gardens. So that was the beginning of this journey of who am I? And I can no more not be in a beautiful environment than if you tell me not to breathe that day. It's just so in me. And everywhere I've gone or lived, I've built a beautiful garden. I just studied everything, read everything. I'm constantly reading, I'm constantly learning. I can't learn enough. And mostly the garden teaches you. That's your best teacher, is the study on what's happening now, every day in the garden. And the plants will tell you whether they're happy or not. If they're not happy, kick them out. Get rid of them. I don't have room for unhappiness in my life. So I'll get somebody who likes it here and put them in. And so I study on them all the time. I watch them. And my brother Tommy lives in New York, out on Long Island, and he has a fabulous garden. And this too was before I was awakened, say. And I would go to his garden and I would just marvel at it, say. I'd walk around and I'd say, well, what's the name of this plant? And he'd say, I don't know, it's a red flower. This is a blue flower. He did it intuitively. So that's how I do it, intuitively. It's just something that I think you could teach others this, to tell you the truth. It's about space, understanding the land that you have and the space. And it's things that I've had students here from UGA helping me, and I tell them, first off, I say, this is a real classroom. This is not theory. It's what works and what doesn't work. See, and it's as simple as that. It either works or it doesn't work. But you sort of have to study on space. So I spend a lot of time just looking. It's not complicated. It's really simple. I've killed a lot of plants, but it's not about the plants. It's about understanding the land and what it will support, the light, and space. About 2 acres or so, it goes. There's a creek down there, and it goes over the creek. So when I first moved here, this was rivers of mud. They had put blown in fescue and ryegrass, and my daughter came to look at it, and she said, Mom, this looks great right now, but you're going to hate it in the spring, because the fescue doesn't do well in Georgia, and the rye is going to dry out. And sure enough, I'm calling her all the time and say, I don't like this. Well, that's what happens in Georgia. But it was, it washed away and died and all of that. So that was the first big lesson. And there was a lot of lessons along the way that I didn't have in other gardens that I built. See, each garden is unique unto itself, and you have to say, like, to yourself, what's this trying to tell me here? Like when the water comes down the hill at 50 miles an hour, it's trying to tell you need good drainage. So before I put any plants in, I had to deal with the unflattering, expensive stuff, which was drainage, and I think mostly it was drainage in the beginning. And so a garden is something that evolves. It doesn't happen overnight unless you hire a company, and then it looks very generic. But if it evolves, it has to, by its own nature, it has your personality, and that's your affinity to it, because it's you, nobody else but you. And everybody's garden is so different. I love going to see gardens because I want to see the personality of the maker of the garden, you know. And you don't have to have a horticulture degree. You don't have to have all these highfalutin whatever's after your name. You just have to look. That's it. Okay, I started in the front. This was mud, and across here was all dead trees and dead vines and kudzu. I'll show you when we get down there what it looked like.
Okay.
And so it was such a massive scale that I thought, okay, I have a sense of order in me that's natural. Some people like chaos. I kind of like order. And what I did was, I didn't trust myself. So I had built this beautiful garden in Asheville, and I hired a landscape architect to do me a master plan, and I learned an important lesson from that. One, I spent way too much money, and two, it wasn't worth it. I could have done the job myself, but I didn't trust myself. And he did just not too good a job, shall we say. So the lesson I learned from that was, do not ever ask a landscape architect to draw a master plan. Get somebody out here for consultation. That way you pay them for an hour or two of their time, and if you like what they say, you haven't lost that much money, see. So I got hold of this landscape architect recommended by UGA, and I had this list of plants that I would like to have in the front, and I wanted him to map out the beds. And the way I study a lot of British gardens and Irish gardens, and the way they do it is by percentage of negative to positive space. And I have a background in art, so I understand that. This is the positive space, this is the negative space. So I told this architect that I wanted to do a 70-30 negative to positive space, so that way he would know how big to draw the beds. See? So that's what he did. He drew out the line for me. Then I gave him, this is great, I gave him the list of plants, and I said, now these are the plants I'd love to plant. And I knew the plants. I'd studied them, I'd researched them, I knew how high they were going to grow, blah, blah, blah. And he put them in all the wrong places, but I didn't say anything to him. You know, if he gave me one good thing, fine, I'll pay for that. But I never planted them where he said, because they were in all the wrong places. So I went to a UGA conference after that for a week, and they don't do it anymore, the extension service, for landscaping for the homeowner, because I still was not sure of myself. And I have this innate ability, but I wasn't sure of it, you know, even though I had built 3 gardens before this. See, that looked beautiful too. So I was at this landscaping thing for the weekend, and we're on a lunch break, and I'm talking to these UGA professors. That it was very good. And I said, you know, I hired this landscape architect to come over and consult me on where to plant some plants, and he put them in all the wrong places. They said, oh, well, landscape architects don't know anything about plants. And I said, that makes sense. You know, so that's where Valerie Hinesley is valuable, because she does know plants, and she's a landscape architect. But to find one that knows plants is a little bit of a trick, you know. Well, now it's about maintenance, so I need help. But in the beginning, me and Miguel, the guy who still cuts my grass, did it all. We put in the trees. I planted 60 trees. They were sticks. Everything was cheap, because I couldn't afford much. I was a school teacher. I didn't have a lot of money, and so I knew how in my head to build a design. I knew that you should put the walls up first, and I knew from living in other houses The first thing I was going to do if I ever bought a house again was to fence myself in, and I don't care what happens on the outside. You know, no matter where I'm going to live, I'm going to fence myself in. And so I built the fences. The first year I could only afford this much fence. The next year I built that much fence on the other side. It's a long fence. Okay, so, but I started in the front, and after a summer of hauling hoses around, and I'm working full-time, I'm thinking, this is not right. Okay, we are going to save up, and we are going to put in an irrigation system here. So I called this friend of mine. She sent me this guy. He put in the irrigation system in the front. It was heaven. Then I could plant the plants, see. So I planted this hedge that's Laurocrasius, I think that's how you say it. It's English laurel, which nobody knows about. I had seen it in some garden and said, if I ever have a hedge, this will be it. And I found it and planted it. And everything was in 1-gallon pots. So I had a budget, and I wouldn't go above the budget. I would only do however much that was, as long as it looked neat and tidy. And so the grass in the front was sod. And so what they did was they blew fescue in here, and it went to the front in the sod. So I was working in Decatur, and every morning at 4 o'clock I would get up, and I had a bucket, a pail, and I had a stopwatch like thing, you know, a timer, put it in my pocket, 1 hour. And I had a little thing that dug out weeds. And I would go out there and fill that pail. I think it took 2 buckets in an hour. And when the buzzer went off, I had to stop, get dressed, and go to work. And every morning, I was out there until I got it all done, you know. And as far as back here is concerned, people tend to put eyelashes on the form first. And the eyelashes are the last thing you think about, which is the plants. The first thing you think about is the space, the percentage of negative to positive space. Anything that's open is positive. Some people hate grass. One of my daughters hates grass. And she says, Mom, this could make a great vegetable garden. And I said, but I like grass, Mary, because an open space is a breathing place. You need to calm down. And I wanted this garden to be a refuge of peace to glorify God. Mm-hmm. And so, mostly for myself, I didn't even think of inviting other people. It was just a personal thing. And as every garden has been that I've built, see, I never thought about doing it for the public, you know. So that's how I went. And then when I would get my taxes back every year, I would do a project. So Miguel and I worked out here, and we planted all those, went to Home Depot and got all those hedge plants and planted them. And at first I was going to let them grow just up to the fence, but I had this not too nice neighbor, so I decided to let them grow up as trees. They worked real well. So first back here, I had to do the beds. And that course that I took at UGA gave me the courage to say, I think I can do this, you know. And so I laid out flags, and I dotted it with paint, and I went along. Actually, you know, the real truth is you can't make a mistake. Once you discover that, you can relax. But I was afraid I was going to make a mistake, especially with my background in design. You know, I don't want to make a mistake, but it's ridiculous. There are no mistakes. You don't like it, change it, right? So I started with the beds here, and the fence, laid out the beds, planted the hedge along the fence, and then the trees. I was anal about the trees, and there was a place in Commerce I used to go to every weekend, and I would get these trees in a gallon or 3 gallon. This tree here is a tree that people call me now in the fall and let me know when it's turning so they could come see it. It's a Chinese pistache. It's beautiful all times of the year. It's one of the few trees that domes. I learned about this in that UGA conference. They gave us gobs of material, and I really studied it. Okay, so I found it there. There's 1, 2, 3. Here, this one's red, that one's yellow, and that one's red down there. They're hard to find, actually. And they look like nothing when you get them. You think, oh, ooh. But it takes about 5 years, and once they start to dome, they're good to go. They're strong, and they can take the wind, which is a southwest wind blowing through here. They're just a great tree, so all year round. So that was my first job, was to get the trees growing, all the vertical elements, because it was just nothing here. And so I got the fence, the hedge, the trees growing, and that was it for a long time. I just put there, I had mulch that I used to have dumped down there. Then I paid, like, the mulch was free, so it cost me $300 to haul it up here, and then it would wash all the way down. Think, am I crazy or what? I'm wasting my money here. So no more did I put mulch down on a slope. So I did this year, and this is holding fairly well. But I didn't bother with that anymore. So then I had somebody, okay, so that's an example of the garden teaching you. So then I said, okay, I'm going to call this irrigation guy, tell him to take a drain, put it up front, and take a long pipe, and there was nothing down there, see, and put it in the creek. That's what he did. So that solved the water problem. So each thing tells you what to do for the next thing. Everything had to be like $2, half dead, on sale. No splurges. Now I splurge, but then it was like, okay, mind your budget. Right. So hardscaping came last almost. This hardscaping was done. Okay, first thing I did was, you see that deck over there? Well, my family was coming to visit for a family reunion of my brothers and sisters, and I was a nervous wreck. I'd been in the house 5 years, and I was trying so hard to make it look like a garden, because they all had established gardens. There are people that visit you, and they walk along and they go, that's a real gardener. They're going to pick out they're looking for the weeds, and that's how they walk through the garden, like this. So I thought, these chairs were on sale. And I said, oh, I'm going to buy those chairs, because then my family could go down into the garden and sit down, and there wasn't a deck there. And they'll sit down and enjoy it from that point of view. Well, little did I know, I'm the youngest of 10. I was 70 at the time, and they were all older than me. I called up my daughter. I said, Mary, take the cars out of your driveway. They can't walk up their driveway. She said, Mom. I said, they're all old, Mary. She said, Mom, you're old. I said, what are you talking about, old? She said, Mom, you're 70. I said, that's not old. So I didn't know they wouldn't be able to walk down there. They were all on walkers and things like that. So I said, I'm not going to tell them I just spent $5,000 for those chairs. So now I don't like furniture that's on the ground because of the bugs. So I would sit down there to read, and I'll be eaten up with bugs. I thought, okay, I have to build a little area and lift these chairs up. Well, the first thing I did was I said, I need shade, because it was all sun. So I planted 10 maple trees around that deck, okay? And they grew like topsy. And I'm sitting up here, and it's depressing, because they're like dark under there, and they're supposed to be red maples. I'm thinking, oh, fall color would be wonderful. No such thing. They were brown in the fall. I kept asking people, how do you get them to turn red? They told me, no way. So I had the deck built even around one of the trees, and the leaves would fall on the furniture and muddy it up and dirty it. I said, you know what? I don't like this. So I called this tree guy. I have a wonderful tree person who only works when he needs money. So if I call him and he doesn't need money, he's not coming. So that summer I was lucky. And there were 10 trees. I paid $10 each for those trees. He charged me $100 to take them out each. So, but it looked much better after. Can you imagine 10 trees around that?
Yeah.
So then I felt much better. Okay, this wasn't here. This was all this grass. This is new this year. So I started over there with that deck, the hardscape deck. It's a really good example of how the garden talks to you. A lot of the plants have come from either Piccadilly's or when they were on sale or Growers Outlet. No fancy, and a lot have been given. So over here is a really good example of how things evolve. First of all, these plants in here that are coppiced are dwarf crepe myrtles, and they're beautiful in July. They're red. And they were all half dead and $2 each at this nursery down in Lake Oconee. And I grabbed them up because I'm always reading about plants, and I said, well, that would be a good one, right? So they've been in the ground at least 10 years. And I coppice them every year. And then they come back. And the reason that you coppice them is because they're dwarf. Well, dwarf doesn't mean they don't get big. Dwarf means the size of the leaf, or tree or bush or whatever. So if you want them to stay at the height they're supposed to be at, where they were bred, you have to coppice them. Because if you leave them, they get about 3 feet high. And if you leave them there and just do the top, it grows higher the next year. So you don't get the effect you want. So this here thing, okay, so I decided to go with umbrellas when I took the trees down for shade, because I needed shade, because this is a sunny garden. This is southwest here. So on this deck, I told him that next year I would call him back and have him build a deck over there, but it was during the downtime. It was 1980 when the market fell. He needed a job, so he said, well, if you'll let me build that deck, you can pay for it along and along. And I said, okay, I'll make it 3 payments and go ahead and do it. So then we had that deck, and we had half a walkway coming out, and I extended the walkway this year. So now time rocks on, and I'm sitting up there overlooking everything, because I'm always looking at everything, and I hear the Lord talk to me, and he said, I'm saying thank you. I'm saying, gosh, I mean, I can't believe that I've been able to do this, Lord. This is so great, and I know that you're pleased and everything. And then this voice came as usual, and he said, you've been blessed to be a blessing. It's time to share. And I said, sure, no problem. So I didn't realize I was a private person, see, until this happened. And so I invited my Bible study group at the Georgia Club to come over. That was the first group. No, I invited an Ollie group. And 2 days before they were coming, I was sick to my stomach, just really bad, sick to my stomach, because I was like in a nut. Somebody is going to walk through my garden. A stranger. I was just like frozen. So I called him up. I said, I'm sorry, Bob, but I'm sick. I have to cancel this. So he said, fine, but he didn't know why. And I was upset with myself. And God said, you have to share. I gave it to you. You got to give it away. So I said, okay, I know what I'll do. I'll ask my Bible study group to come over here. And I know those people, so it should be a breeze. Well, they came, and I was still had a knot in my stomach really bad, thinking, you know, I was feeling I was going to be judged. But like I said, there are no mistakes. People don't know what they're looking at. They don't see the weeds. But I thought they would and judge me. So they're all sitting on this little deck here. This wasn't here. And the first thing that hit me was, okay, I have to make this larger. If I'm going to invite people over here, you know, I have to expand. So the next year, I had this much put in over here. Okay, and that worked for a while. And then I'm standing here. This is a great lesson in how things evolve. So I'm standing here, and all of this was this juniper, blue rug juniper, which I had put in to hold down the weeds. And every year I would kill myself pulling the weeds out. And I'm thinking, this isn't working. So there's not many flat places here on this property. So I'm thinking, hey, this is relatively flat. I should take out these stupid things that are not working and put some solid ground in there. About that time, a friend of mine gave me that table. It's a Brown Jordan table, and I'm nuts about Brown Jordan furniture. It's from the 1980s. It was broken, the top was broken, and I had it stored in the bushes over there. And I didn't know what to do with it, but I found this guy in Jefferson who could bona fide repair it. It came back to me, and I said, that table is so beautiful, I'm going to build a space to honor that table. The rest of the furniture that goes with it over here is out being restored that she gave me. So that was that. And then I didn't know what kind of surface I wanted, so I called Valerie for a consultation. And she said, Oconee pea gravel. And I said, bingo. Because sometimes you need somebody who's objective to look at your garden for you, and they get it and it registers. So then I figured out the edge and everything, and at first it was small. It just went to those trees. And these liripi that are here were all in here. And next year I said to myself, why don't I just expand it, because people were coming and they wanted to sit down here. It wasn't big enough, see. And so I said, okay. The next year I had the liripi taken out, put around there, and more pea gravel put in. And then I wanted to put my hammock up here, which is my psychiatrist. It's the best therapy you could ever have, is a hammock. It's free and it's just glorious. I have hammock time at 3 o'clock every day when the sun hits it just right. And now the trees are canopying very nicely, so they prevent shade for me. And so I was thrilled that I moved the hammock from down there. Okay, and there was still nothing here yet, down here. So then the next year, I thought I should make it just a little bit bigger because there's still more flat land here. So I had this piece put in here. Then the next year, that was last year, I had it extended again to there. And then this year, I had that little step put in. And I swear to you, that's the last thing I'm going to do. You know what that's like, right? You say, okay, it's finished. It's never finished. So now I'm satisfied, especially with COVID. I could move the chairs further around, and I'm happy with it. And then I decided to put the umbrellas in because of the shade when I took out all those trees. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I since had it redecked because I had to take out that tree that was in the middle. And then another thing presented itself. My daughter came and looked at it and she said, Mom, you're going to have a problem because this is going to go downhill, the pea gravel. And sure enough, she was right. When it rained, she said, you need some steps there. So I put the steps in. And the vision that I have is to find somebody who makes great wrought iron, like European wrought iron, and put 2 beautiful railings there. And that would be hopefully in my lifetime. When you're doing a garden, you have to look at the overall space, but the most important lesson is the one I learned from my uncle. You just do one little area at a time. You get that done, then you stay in that area, sit down, just have yourself a cup of tea and look out. What do you see from where you are? Very important. Like, if you're sitting here, what am I looking at? So every area that I built with that in mind. What am I seeing from where I'm sitting? And I like a lot of chairs because I'm old. And when I'm working, I like to sit down. So chairs are my thing. And the chairs add a sculptural element to the garden. See, the Adirondack chairs represent Nantucket to me, and the Northeast, which is my childhood. And then those chairs are like pieces of sculpture. So I use them, instead of sculpture, I use furniture. And the nice part about it too, design-wise, is that in the winter time, I'm always thinking about winter. If your garden looks good in January, it's spectacular in June and July. So I set out to make sure that everything was copacetic in the winter time. So the color of the chairs doesn't go away. And in the summer, you don't notice it as much because all the greenery is out and little flowers are blooming. But in the winter time, it's wonderful because it builds structure into the garden and it holds it in place. Okay. And one of the things I learned from that course that I took with UGA is that about 80 to 70% of your garden should be regular plants or bushes that hold the garden in winter. Mm-hmm. Like boxwood or stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And so I set out to do that to these boring plants that, you know, they don't shout and say, hey, look over here, right? So that's the evolution of this area. And then, so if you go over to this deck now, well, we'll look over there. With the grass, I kept telling my daughter, saying, Pat, I hate this grass. And she would say, Mom, that's what fescue does in July in Georgia. And I'd say, what can I do? So I called the extension agent over, and that's a wonderful service. And the ag agent came out. He was great. And I said, I hate this grass. I put a fortune into it, reseeding it, trying to take care of it. Just always looked a mess. So he said, okay, come out here January 1st after a good frost, take a hose and sprayer, which I didn't even know what that was, go to Home Depot, $10, put it on your hose, turn your water back on, and kill everything. So that's what I did. I killed it all, and then I seeded it with a little thing like that. And that's the result. Feeding seed who knew a lot about grasses. He has since died. But I would go down there and ask him a million questions because I never had a house with grass before. I didn't know what you do with grass. No, I had a house in the mountains. I had a Japanese garden in Atlanta. I had a mountain house with rhododendrons and Mount Laurel. And in Asheville, I had, maybe this much grass. That was it. And the rest was all woods that I made into like a parkland with rhododendrons. So no, this was my first experience with grass. In fact, when I first moved in, then the spring came and the grass started growing, and I'm working out here, exhausting myself, and I go out, and we had Easter break from school, and I go out to the front and I'm saying, Lord, what am I going to do about this grass? I don't even have a lawnmower. I don't know anything about grass. And this is a lot of grass. How am I going to take care of it? And just about that time, this guy up the street was a big mower coming out of this truck. And I say, go up there and ask him who does his house and ask him to come down here and cut your grass. So I go up there and I say, what service cuts your grass? He says, it's me. I work for True Green. And I say, I did a gulp like, and I say, do you do work on the side? And he said, yes. And I was his first customer, really. So he had this ride behind thing, and I said, would you come down and look at my grass and see if you would cut it for me? He said, sure. So he rode down here, and I rode with him, and he cut the grass that day, and he's been with me ever since. Miguel Gueves, and he helped me do it. He used to live up there, and then he divorced and moved away, and he went into his own business. Then I said, Miguel, 2 things you need to know about going into your own business, and you will be successful beyond your wildest dreams. And he is now. I said, first, you need to give God the glory, and second, you need to give some away, and you will be successful beyond your wildest dreams. And I said, now, when you have to promise you'll always cut my grass. And then I had a guy come in this winter and do this, which was actually the money I was going to spend to go to England to see the garden. So I splurged, right? And I love the way it looks. And so I took the Loripie back and put it back in, and it's going to look gorgeous. I don't like a hard edge in the garden. Nature doesn't have any hard edges, really. You know, I love pea gravel, so, and I already had the furniture. I had this, and I sent it out to be restored. I already had it. I didn't have to buy anything. I used to live on Lake Raven, and this reminded me so much of Lake Raven. It just looked like it belonged up there. So I got through the house, and I said, good girl, you did nothing, nothing. So I go outside, and this thing has a sign on it. It says $100. I said, Eileen, you are not spending that money today. But I wanted to know the history of it, see. But it reminded me so much of Lakemont. It's wrought iron, which is hard to find. So I asked the owner, mistake number 1. I said, could you tell me a little bit about this furniture? She said, well, it's my husband's mother's. So that means it was probably from the 50s, right? And so I said, oh, thank you very much. So she told me all the original seats and everything. So I'm walking away. I'm patting myself. Good girl, keep going. And she turns around, she says, you know, today is half price day. And I needed it like a hole in the wall. You know, I didn't even know where I was going to put it. And I said, I justified it, and they delivered it for free and put it down by the creek down there. I had no idea. I said, I'll give it to my granddaughters because wrought iron is hard to find. So that was that. And it stayed down there for years until we built this space. And it's all about space, see? All about the percentage of hard space. So, see, this wouldn't look the same if all of this was pea gravel. It would look ostentatious. So that's how, so I had them bring it up, and I said, oh my God, this is my writing desk now. Okay, so like I'm gonna keep a journal of the garden. Oh, I'm not good at it. I did one time, I put something in it. But I've been too busy in the garden to write. But this is where I'm going to write. Because when I lived at the lake, I always went down to the dock after I laid in the hammock, went down to the dock 4 o'clock, made myself a martini or something, and wrote. So that's my dream for this area. I already had that, so no problem. So now I had to extend, in order to do this, this was a huge renovation. I had to extend the walkway. See, it went to here. It went out to here. And then I had to have it extended. So that was the first thing I did, was extend the walkway. And what I do is, most of my work is done in the winter time, so I'm saving all summer for the project. Because I know it's coming up. So I'm going to save my money. Because this is a sugar maple here that was really struggling, and my tree man needed money again, so he came over and did the work, and he climbed that tree and he fixed it for me. I said, let's make it pretty. Look at it now. And so see, there's another big one I had taken out there. He's quite a tree man. He'll climb the trees because I didn't want any big stuff big machines in here. Now the little chipmunks ate my deck. It was cedar. Okay. I spent all that money on cedar because I thought it would never rot and impermeable, right? No. Learned a big lesson. Don't use cedar. So Miguel introduced me to this wonderful guy. His name is Manuel. He built it this winter. Some of the cedar boards were still good. So I said, Manuel, do you think you could put them down there on that deck, which is half rotted? And he said, sure. And he didn't charge me for that. A gift, right? So there was all shrubs in here, and I had them taken out. Because these were all in pots. The frost got them. See? And I put them in the ground. I don't have deer. You know why? Because I use all organic fertilizer. They hate it, especially Milorganite. So I'm going to go in here and put Milorganite all over this place because they won't eat the hostas then. Because now I have a problem. Workmen come here and they think I'm rich. And they overcharge me. And I tell them, I say, no, I'm not rich at all. I just knew how to save my money and how to buy. If you buy small plants and they die, you don't cry. If you buy a big plant and it dies, you're like, oh my gosh, look at how much that cost me, right? And then one other thing here is that I said I'm always looking at winter. Well, in the winter time, you don't see them right now, but ornamental grasses are out of this world spectacular all winter. I couldn't recommend them strongly enough. There's a lot to them, but they're virtually take care of themselves if they live through the first year. There are some that are coming up there and over there. That's north wind. And they will get as high as St. Francis, and they look beautiful. And now these are mock orange, and as I said, I'm sitting over there and I'm saying, what am I looking at? And I had that one first. I said, now that is gorgeous. I want more. So I ordered 4 more. And they are in mass together. And it's going to be gorgeous. This one, guys, it's okay. I had these trees here are arborvitaes, green giant. Hey, like they were this big. I want to put them in the ground. Miguel and I planted those. They were in a gallon container for $6. You look at them, and the reason I put them in there was there was nothing here, okay, and it was all runaway woods over there. If you can't build a stable fence, build a green wall. Okay, so this is all green wall down here. So I said, you know, somebody's gonna move into that house and you're not gonna like what they do. So you better block yourself off. So I put them in. They were little bitty things, and I'm so glad I did it. This is a Japanese maple that I found for $5, and I brought it back to life. There's a lovely thing under it that is not in its glory right now, but will be in June and July. It's called Aztec grass. This one is, I swear that one day I'll label everything, but this one is one I found in Greenville, South Carolina. It's Tamukiyama. And I didn't realize that I already had two that I found in little bitty half-gallon cans or something growing. But it's a beautiful tree. It's in the ground now 2 years. And when I planted it, I had read this book by Prince Charles on his garden, High Grove. And the way they plant trees there is high. Very different from what we do. So I did that to that and one that's in the front. And I like the effect of it. Because if you plant it low in the ground, if you dig too deep a hole, it struggles in getting through the roots. This garden here, we haven't done weeding here yet, but these are 3 that I found for $2 each. You see how old they are now, butterfly bushes. They're white, and they will cover the well. I was just starting the planting, and I said, if I'm to have a garden, I need water. Plants don't need fertilizing, they need water, especially when they get bigger. So the guy who put the irrigation in said, you really need to put irrigation back here. So he put it in for me and he let me pay for it in payments, which was great. And then the first time I ran it back here, it was $400. And I called him up and I said, hey, like, I'm just a little school teacher here. There's no way I'm going to pay $400 a month for water. And he said, you need a well. Well, being from New York, I know nothing about wells. I was lucky to know that peas grew on a thing, not in the grocery store. So I did some research and I went around the countryside looking for people whose garden had wells here at Bishop and Oconee County, and I would go knocking on their doors and I would say, could you tell me something about your well? And that was like research, right? R&D. So one guy scared me to death. He said, well, we had this diviner come out and he did his thing, and it sounded so exotic to me. And he said, do it here. So he said, we went down so many feet and the guy charged me $6,000, no water. We called back the diviner. He says, do it here. He does it there. Again, $6,000, no water. It's $12,000. And then finally he said, I fired that guy and I went over here and said, do it here. And I hit water. And I thought, I can't afford that. I said, well, so the Irish in me knew it was just intuitive where to get the water. And I didn't even know there were rules and regulations. And this is a subdivision. I wasn't even thinking subdivision. And it's a good thing I didn't live in there because nobody could have got there. You had to come this way. See? Well, he's out here. He comes and he gives me a price. This guy in Bishop, I think he's Bogart. So he gives me a price. And I say, I'll have to take money out of my retirement fund to do this. And Lord, you better make this good for me because I'm trying hard. So, not to be in debt. So, he comes. And he's got this big rig down here. And it's in January, freezing cold. And I'm walking back and forth up there talking to God. And I'm saying, Lord, please don't make them go down too far. This is going to cost me. So, this Mexican kid comes running up. Missy, you got to come see your water. Well, the guy, I told him we had to have 30 PSI because that's what the irrigation man said to run the system. So I put on some shawls and I come down here in the freezing cold and the water is just gushing out down to the creek, gushing out. So I say to the guy, well, did you hit 30 PSI? He stopped. We stopped counting at 400. You could supply the city of Winder with this water. You could retire now and sell it to the city. And I'm saying, really? And so the Mexican guys, I said, well, I was up there praying that you wouldn't have to go down too far. And this Mexican guy says, well, God really listens to you. I said, yes, he does. So that was the story of the well. And so he said, well, I have actually a better pump than the one I was going to sell you, and I'll sell at the shop, and I'll give it to you for less than what I was going to sell you. The other one, it was a win-win all the way around. So for one whole year, I would sit up there, turn the system on. I felt so rich. The water would run. I'd call this guy up and I'd say, guess what I'm doing? I'm listening to the water run. After a year, he said, you know, I've never known anybody so nuts about water as you. I just felt very rich that I had this system going, you know. So, but I stopped it up there because this was wild at the time. This wasn't here. That was wild. You see back those woods, that's what it looked like. This developed because I found that chair on sale for $400, and it was like a $1,500 chair, and I couldn't resist it. So I put it on the ground, and I said, no, I hate ground. Come on, we're going to build a thing for it. So that's how this came about. So this wasn't here. So come look at the view from here. I wanted to establish a focal point and a meditation area. Doesn't it look like you're in another garden? This area was given to me by a friend who was moving. She was Polish and she had a beautiful garden, so she gave me some cannas. I brought Miguel over there. I said, Miguel, we got to go dig up some flowers from this friend's garden. Will you help me? He says, sure. He goes over there. She is blonde, has a great face. He says, Miss Eileen, she's beautiful. I said, Miguel, you're a married man. Forget it. Let's just dig the flowers. But she's so beautiful. He kept asking me, could he go back again? I said, no, she moved, Miguel. So bad. So she gave me all those. I had no idea about cannas or what to do with them. So they went over there. And in the summer, they're 6 to 8 feet high. Mm-hmm. Right? So they just live by themselves over there. But this is, if you see the view, as I said, it's very important to sight a view from wherever you're at. And this garden here came because I was sitting here. And so I said, I'm going to make a spring garden there. Okay, so now this is Dallas bluegrass, and you have to come back in the fall when the grasses are at their best to see this garden. It gets about as high as me, and then the plumes grow up, okay? And in the wind, they just sort of blow. It's just funny. All of these grasses came from 3 that I bought down at Lake Oconee in a day when I splurged. I think I paid $30 each, but I got 10 grasses out of them. And this year I gave the original plants to a British friend of mine, and he got 10 plants out of them. So, you know, they pay off, right? So now I was studying a guy named Pete Oldorf from Holland. I love his work. His work looks very painterly. He did the New York High Line and the Lowry Garden in Chicago, and lots of worldwide stuff. And he likes ornamental grasses, but I was trying to figure out how can I take that idea and put it in my garden. He uses perennials with ornamentals. Okay, so that thing that you gave me, this bear, Helianthus augustifolium, that's its name. Okay, that all came from that plant that you gave me. Okay, and so it grows up, you know, and when these grow up, they're all massed together, so you see them blowing in the wind together. It's like a symphony. But last year I learned that these get so high that you have to do a May chop on them. You know what a May chop is? So as soon as they get a little bit higher, I'll go back and whack them down completely so that they stay behaving themselves. Mm-hmm. And then I'm trying to do a lavender hedge in front. These are some trees. These turn out to be bushes, really. I thought they were trees. And I had all the trees this year treated with macrosite. Macrosite is the most wonderful thing you could do for your soil, especially with trees. It's a little bacteria, I think, or fungus that is not visible to the eye. And it's nature's aerator. You have to put it into the roots. And I learned about it in Asheville. And then it aerates the soil so that the roots can take up the nutrients. And trees that are treated with this do fabulous. So I had the whole garden done this year. I finally found a guy who could do it, a company, and I said do it. So he did it. So these were treated this year, and they are looking, because they don't get water here. And these are our varieties here, mm-hmm. But these are the trees. So these are going to get as big as those over there. And that's going to be a wall here. Mm-hmm. Don't you think that will look? They just have opened. Here's another grass that's wonderful. An animal's in here. Look at that. Mm-hmm. A big animal. I don't think that's a deer, do you? Ooh. Okay, so this is Japanese stripe, Miscanthus Japanese stripe grass. It's absolutely beautiful, and it's so small because I gave Peter and his wife 3 plants from that one. This is a red barked Japanese maple. Here's that one that's down there that I said I didn't know I had it. And I took this from up there. It just goes to show you the plants may not be happy in one space. And it was struggling for years. And I took it one winter and Miguel just threw it in the ground down here. And look at it now. It loves it here. So see how pretty that looks over there? That's its first year blooming. These irises were all given to me, and I've never known what to do with the irises in this garden. I planted those first, those trees. See, I planted all the trees first. And then if you look down here, I've had them all lifted. It makes such a difference, huge difference. My tree man was in a good mood and he needed money, so he said, okay. So he lifted all this for me. Every year there's a winner in the garden that's a plant. This year it was the pansies. I've never planted pansies before. And I sure will plant them again, because they're so cheerful. It was the pansies and the roof iris that Dr. Durr gave me. I want 100 of those. I'm going to try to do it from seed if I can. These are some hydrangeas that I didn't know what to do with, so I just stuck them here, and they're beautiful in the summer. You just finished. These are just going over now. All the azaleas was fabulous. These, Dr. Durr gave me those, what do you call those things?
Solomon seal?
Yeah, and I had them in that pot, and I didn't like the way they looked, so I pulled them out, and I put that shrub in there, and there was still things left. So I'm going to leave it like that. Looks like I did on purpose, right? No. These, I don't know if you've ever grown them. Oh, what is it called now? Fantastic. They were the winter last. I had them in the fountain. Oh, they were spectacular.
Yeah.
So I got a bunch more this year to put in pots. This is the potting area. Okay. So this hedge here is that laurel hedge, and it was about 6 feet high at least, and I whacked it down. I did a real rejuvenation on it. And that's a very British thing to do. You can't see much of what I did, but if you looked inside, it looks like I've killed it, but it'll come back, you know. There's a really cute story, this area right here. I have to tell you about. See those two little bushes in there? Okay. Well, I helped Vicki with her garden the year she was on tour, and so to thank me, I said, how do you prepare your soil, because I don't like digging. I like no-till thing. She said, well, I have this little digger and I dig everything and put them. I said, well, I have some hydrangeas I want to plant. Could you come help me? She said, sure. So she brings home over her super little digger thing, and we were out here digging away, and she hits these roots from this tree that used to be. I said, hold on a minute. So I have little hand tools mostly, so I went in and I got my axe, and I just stood there with the axe, and I'm going like this. She said, oh my God. She said, you're a Wonder Woman. At that moment, Miguel drives up with his workmen in the truck, and they're laughing their heads off with these two old ladies out here. They trying to do this. And I said, well, let me show you how to use it. So I showed her how to get leverage and how to use it to get the roots out and everything. She said, man, this was so great. She went home and bought the axe. The plants died, but it was a great experience with her. Miguel was just laughing his head off, us two out here with that axe. And so this year I found these from Cheryl and her husband. I really liked them in her garden. It's a little quickfire, and they're growing. So I put them in the winter, and they'll be beautiful there. So that's the story of that. This is another Japanese maple here that I saw in Virginia. It's a large leaf Japanese maple, and it has a big long Japanese name that I can't remember. The frost got some of it. The bigger the leaf, the bigger the tree. Probably over 100 of them, and some over there, and they all came from one plant, one clump. And I brought the clump down from my house in Asheville because I like to always have something from a previous garden living here, and then I just kept dividing them. And in June, early July, they're spectacular. They're all blooming. They're very high, and they're all blooming at the same time. This here, these came from Valerie's when her dad was alive, these cedar trees, and I put them in there I didn't want to see the next door neighbors. And so I didn't realize that they would be so lacy looking. So under them I planted these arborvitae, see?
Mm-hmm.
And when they grow up, then I'll cut the lower limb.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll mass together. And that'll be a real nice... Here's a tree right here, is a maple. And when I first moved in this house, I found this guy. It was a job finding him, but he understood macrossi and he had stuff to treat it, the trees, and that tree was struggling. There was nothing here, okay? These little guys were like this, little balls in front of the house. And he charged me $250. He came from Comer. And he injected the soil all around it, and he felt so guilty he ran around and injected everything else that was here. And he said, you know, that's a lot of money to pay for this tree. He said the problem was that the builders ran over the soil and made it hard pan.
Compacted it.
Yeah, so that's what it needed, was the macrossi. I said, well, now you see how much I care about a tree. He said, in 5 years, you're not going to believe this tree. That's the same tree. This year, this tree was so magnificent, I said I'm going to do every tree in my garden because that tree is so magnificent. And it was all because of the macrossi.
Mm-hmm.
So, and these are some, crepe myrtles. They're white. And I like crepe myrtles that you make into trees instead of murdering them.
Yeah, me too.
This is a Savannah holly. This is its shedding time. There's another one over here. They grow beautifully in South Carolina. And then I planted them for winter interest.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.